Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where we recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 21st of February, 2024. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So before jumping into the news over the last 24 hours, just wanted to give a quick shout out that the Daily Gwei Refuel, or I guess like the Daily Gwei channel / podcast is growing again. Now, obviously you guys know that the content I do on this show is, I would say, very involved and very kind of niche. It kind of caters to the people who are really into the Ethereum / have a lot of background knowledge about what's going on, and it's definitely not for the newbies out there. Now, I have said before that we were at about 4,000 daily listeners / watchers of the Refuel, and that's since been trending up. Now, of course, I think this is a natural consequence of the fact that the market has been trending up. Things are getting more exciting from that point of view, and I'm curious to know like how many new people are part of that cohort. So if you are new to the Daily Gwei show, be sure to let me know either in the YouTube comments or in the Discord channel. I'd love to hear from you. But yeah, we're up to I think 4,500 per day now. So as I said, like because the channel obviously is not anything that's going to be catering to a mass audience, and I've purposely done it like that because I don't really care to cater to a mass audience. That kind of growth is actually pretty substantial and pretty noticeable, and I do notice it when I look at the stats on the podcast and on the YouTube shows here. So it's really great to see that. And that's just the Refuel. When it comes to the Drive Thru, the episode that I did with Eric had over 6,000 listens and watches on it, which was just awesome. And, you know, I really hope that we can do more of those episodes. I really love doing the episodes with Eric. I know it brings a lot of people back to the Into the Ether days when Eric and I used to do that podcast back in the day. And as I said before, Eric and I just bounce really well off each other and it works really well. So I'm hoping to do more of those going forward. But yeah, that got over 6,000 views. So I still think the most viewed kind of episode or listened and viewed episode I've done was the one I did with Kobe, which was a while ago now, and I think that got like 10,000 or something like that. But obviously Kobe has a really big presence within the ecosystem, not just within the Ethereum community, but within other communities out there. So that makes a lot of sense there. But maybe we can dethrone that episode one day, me and Eric, or maybe even the Refuel dethrones it. But yeah, as I said, Refuel's at about 4,500 a day average, and that episode with Eric did over 6,000, which was really, really great to see. And, you know, I had people kind of messaging me that don't ever really watch the Refuel, saying that they kind of listened and watched the episode with Eric. And even my dad actually called me and he's like, so I listened to the episode you did with Eric, and I laughed because I'm like, well, did you understand anything we were talking about? And he's like, oh yeah, kind of, but not really, because he also follows me on Twitter, which is even funnier because he'll sometimes bring up my tweets and he's like, who are these people that just like come at you with this stuff and you kind of hit them back? And I'm like, well, we call them reply guys, and he doesn't really understand, but it's kind of funny when he says that he's kind of following me on Twitter and he sees my tweets. I'm just like, yeah, that's just the way it is. I said to him, it doesn't really affect me anymore, these reply guys. I understand, you know, they're just kind of, a lot of the time they're just noobs to the ecosystem. They don't really understand what they're saying. And sometimes they're even just bots, right? But yeah, it's kind of funny when I got that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to doing another episode with Eric on Friday. As I said the other day, we're going to be talking about how to take profits in the bull market, because Eric has a lot more experience there than I do. And as I mentioned the other day, he is very, very good at doing it. But I'm going to give my kind of thoughts on it too. And also on top of that, we're going to be answering hopefully all, but it depends on time, but like hopefully all of the questions that have been asked in the AMA series channel in the Daily Gwei Discord channel. So yeah, maybe it'll end up being a pretty long episode there. Just depends on kind of how that shakes out. But anyway, spent enough time talking about that stuff. Let's dive into the news from the last 24 hours. So as you guys know, client diversity is a huge topic within the Ethereum ecosystem. And right now it's all about the client diversity on the execution layer side of things. We're trying to get Geth to below 66%, which is that critical threshold, and ideally down to, you know, below 60, 50% sort of thing. And I mean, in the perfect case scenario, we would like them to be at around 30, maybe 40% sort of thing. But let's just get them below 66% before we start thinking about perfect case scenarios. But the reason I bring this up today is because Thorsten here, who is very involved within the Ethereum staking and infrastructure space, been around for a long time. I've actually met him, really, really nice guy. But he tweeted out this tweet today, basically saying that according to this other website that tracks client diversity, Geth is at around 75% right now. Now, I remember the other day I mentioned that clientdiversity.org has Geth listed at 69%, but that doesn't have 100% coverage. And that, I think it has about like 60% coverage. And it's also based on publicly available information and the, I guess, maintainer of the client diversity website going out there and asking each operator what they're running here. And this resource that Thorsten is using, I think is using network crawlers because it has about 93% network coverage here. It might be a mix of both network crawler and publicly available information. And I remember I kind of highlighted this website, but I can't remember what the website is, but it was a website that allowed you to basically change the sliders here for the client diversity share of each of the node operators. And you could actually see that if, these node operators got off 50% Geth, for example, and went with 50% something else, what that would actually have, what effect that would actually have on the overall Geth dominance here. Now, Thorsten replied to his own tweet by saying, if Coinbase, Kiln, and Kraken committed to running only 50% Geth, we are very close to solving this. Theoretical with 50% Geth for those three, it brings us to 64% Geth. So, as I said the other day, Coinbase is basically going to give us an update by the end of Feb, and if they don't, we're going to put pressure on them to give us an update there. But yeah, it only takes a few of these big players to really, really move the needle here. So I just wanted to give an update on that. And as I said the other day when I covered this, any of the data sets that we have are not going to be perfect. The best we can do is try and get the supermajority clients down as much as possible, even if we have certainty or relative certainty that they're already at like 66% or below 66%. We need to get it, lower than that. Where ideally no client has over 50% market share, I think, on either side there. And I think that it really is only Geth right now, because if I go to clientdiversity.org and I bring the website up for you guys here, and I scroll down, you can actually see that no consensus layer client is over 40% right now. And that's based on, I guess, the Sigma Primes data. But then if you go to Mega Labs and Rated.network, they have, there's different data here, but they're all around 40% or lower, which is really healthy, obviously, because they're nowhere near the 66% mark. And it doesn't seem like that's going to be a problem going forward, because all the clients are really, really great. But as I've said, on the execution layer side of things, these big operators have been kind of hesitant to go with some of these other clients because they didn't think that they were up to scratch, but they definitely are these days, especially ones like Nethermind and and even Besu. I think Aragon is still a little bit, behind here on that front, but they are definitely kind of catching up there. But we just want to have Geth below kind of 50%, I think, is like the goal for the next maybe year or so. But the goal, within the next few weeks, should be below 66%. Ideally, we get that to that milestone before Denkun hits. That's the kind of thing that we should be aiming for. Denkun is not far away now. It's a few weeks away. 3 weeks or so, whatever it is. So yeah, hopefully we get to that part there. Now, related to this topic as well, there's another client that you guys know that I've talked about before called Reth, which is being developed by the Paradigm team. This is an execution layer client built in Rust. It is still in kind of like alpha beta, mode right now, where it's basically not recommended to run in a production environment, and that's why you really don't see it run in a production environment. There are people running it I think there are some brave people running it with validators attached to it, but you're not going to see any large providers running this client just yet. But the reason why I mentioned Reth today is because Georgios, the lead developer, I think, on Reth at Paradigm, tweeted today that Reth's audit has commenced. So they're getting an official audit done here, which I guess would coincide with maybe like a proper beta release and then maybe like a public release. But still, once it's kind of released like that, there's still going to be a while. I'm going to have to say like a very long while before any of the large providers are comfortable running that client, because at the end of the day, these clients are going to have validators attached to them, and they're going to need to perform well in order for the validators to be profitable, in order for these services to be profitable, to be competitive, right? So we will see more adoption there, but I think that, the audit will get done. It'll release either in a beta fashion still, like the next version of the beta, or it will release as kind of, a public release, a full public, a permissionless kind of release there, or at least not a beta release there. But we'll have to see how that kind of shakes out. But anyway, you can go check out Thorsten's tweet about client diversity. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. And looking forward to hearing more about this, Reth audit as time goes on. All right, so I spoke the other day about how we don't really have any good lists for a solo staker airdrop. So basically, we don't have any lists that have a definitive list of solo stakers, because it's really hard to get one of these lists. Now, there's been two efforts that have been, tried so far. One of them being from the Rated.network team, and the other one being from, I can't remember the exact name. I think it's GLC something. I linked this the other day, and that list was, or at least from my kind of anecdotal evidence, was more comprehensive than Rated.network's list, because Rated.network's list only went up to 500,000 validators, the first 500,000 validators, right? But the reason why I bring this up today is because Elias, I should say here, from the Raider.network team has put out a tweet today saying, we have updated our curated solo stakers list to include another 1,000 addresses that the first run did not classify appropriately. Downstream, Starknet has updated their distribution logic, and another 6.9 million Stark will be claimable by the newly tagged addresses. And, as you guys know, the Stark token went live and was trading and was claimable over the last 24 hours. As well, and this definitely played into that, and I saw people tweeting out and kind of talking about it in the Discord channel, saying that their eligible validators were counted this time and they got the airdrop, so that was great to see. But I'm liking this. I'm liking this fact that we're getting these lists and refining these lists, because they're going to inform a lot of airdrops going forward. And I'm going to talk about some of the upcoming massive airdrops at the end of the episode today. I've got a list that I want to talk about there, but I feel like that Starknet has started a trend now, and it's going to be basically expected now that at least the big Ethereum kind of aligned projects are going to be airdropping at least a portion of their token supply to solo stakers. And of course, we also want them donating up to 1% of their total token supply to the protocol guild as well, which is kind of related to, I guess, what I'm saying about Ethereum alignment. I mean, it not kind of related, it's directly related here. But yeah, it's great to see that we're refining the list, because it means we have more coverage. It means that we can have more confidence that people can have more confidence in spinning up their own solo staker nodes and solo staker validators and becoming a node operator themselves in order to get access to some of these airdrops. And I've already seen some people tweeting about this, saying that they've specifically become a solo staker because of the fact that they want to be eligible for these airdrops. So, I mean, this is great, guys. This is financial incentives at work, right? But as I said, we need to have a really good canonical and kind of like well-defined, respected list that is able to cover the vast majority. I mean, there's always going to be ones that slip through the cracks, but we're going to be able to cover the vast majority of solo stakers, both existing and new. But anyway, yeah, you can go check out basically the updated list here. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, so some news out of Circle today. So Circle is the company behind the USDC stablecoin. Now, the news from today from them is basically that they're discontinuing USDC on the Tron blockchain in a phased transition. Effective immediately, we will no longer mint USDC on Tron. Transfers and redemptions of USDC on Tron will continue to operate normally through February 2025. And then you can read the details here, of course. Now, people were kind of speculating about this today, about what the reason for Circle kind of pulling out here on Tron. And honestly, I don't think it requires much speculation. I am like 99% confident about the reason I'm about to give as to why they actually did this. But I do want to give a little bit of history here first. I remember saying on the refuel, I'm pretty sure I said this on the refuel. If I didn't say it on the refuel, I did say it to a lot of my friends in the ecosystem. I said, I didn't understand why Circle was doing this strategy of putting USDC on multiple chains. Like, they were trying to get USDC everywhere, basically, instead of sticking to like the top chains, right? And the ones that they can actually compete on and doubling down on those, because there's USDC on pretty much like every chain, or every chain that's, I guess, like somewhat relevant or somewhat talked about. And I always thought that was a mistake. And I think that them pulling out of Tron, which is one of the bigger chains, is pretty big evidence of that, right? And pretty much validates my thesis around that. So that's the kind of context there in the background. And now the reason why I believe that they're kind of pulling USDC off Tron is because Tron has a very, very big user base of Tether, of USDT. USDT is extremely dominant on Tron. It is more dominant on Tron than Ethereum for smaller payments. Like, there are so many people that use it in South America, in Africa, and I've talked about this on the refuel plenty of times before, but I think that is the sole reason that Circle is pulling out here. Now, is this a good or bad thing? I think it's a really good thing, because as I said, I don't think that they should be putting USDC on every chain like the shotgun approach. I really think that they should double down on where they're going to be the most successful. Now, of course, this begs the question, where are they going to double down on? Now that they've pulled USDC off Tron, where are they going to make up for this loss of market share? Well, to me, that's obvious, because if you connect the dots, Coinbase owns, I believe, 25% of Circle. Coinbase and Circle work extremely closely together. USDC is basically considered the Coinbase stablecoin. So what else does Coinbase have that could act as a nice payments layer for USDC? Well, the base, a layer 2 blockchain, right? So I think that, and I hope that, honestly, I mean, I think, and I also hope that Circle is now going to put in a lot more effort into scaling up USDC on Base, because USDT does not have a foothold there. Base is a Coinbase-owned product right now. It's still centralized, right? It's not decentralized. Coinbase has an extremely vested interest in both Circle and Base doing well. So it is an absolute no-brainer to me that they should be getting USDC to be the dominant stablecoin on Base. Now, how can they do this? Well, the most obvious, and something that they've already done, is offer free transactions on Base for USDC. That is something that they can offer right now. It's obviously something they have to pay for because it's not quote unquote free, but they're the ones running the sequencer. So they're basically just paying for the execution costs and obviously the cost to settle down to Ethereum L1. But really, most of the cost falls into the execution here that they have to kind of do in the background, and it just becomes a line item on, you know, on their kind of like company, I guess, like how they run their company, right? It's Coinbase here. And by doing this, it basically gives USDT or Tether zero chance of getting a foothold on Base because Tether is not going to be free to transfer. So if you're going to be using a stablecoin, you're obviously going to want to use the one that's free to transfer. You're going to use the one that has, you know, the deepest liquidity, that has the backing of the, you know, the companies on the chain that you're using. So I think that they're going to be doubling down on Base. And I hope that they're going to be doing that because they can very quickly scale up Base to be an absolutely awesome payments chain that can be integrated with all of the existing integrations that Tron has so that we can finally supplant Tron with a layer 2. And the reason why I say this is because Tron obviously is another layer 1 blockchain. It is something that I don't consider to be decentralized at all, and it has zero plans to be decentralized. It is obviously run by, or at least kind of was created by Justin Sun, which is not, you know, who obviously is not a great character in the ecosystem. He's done a lot of shady things in the past, of course, and Base is just much better. It's a layer 2. It's backed by Coinbase, a very legitimate company, right? And as I said, like Tron, Tether does not have a foothold on Base yet, so getting USDC to have a foothold on there is a no-brainer to me. And I really think that Circle should pull USDC off of some other chains as well that are just completely irrelevant at this point. I mean, as I said, they have USDC on pretty much everything. I feel like they should redirect their efforts all to pretty much Base. Honestly, if they just redirected all of their efforts to Base, they would be able to capture an absolutely massive amount of market share. Because they already have pretty big market share on Ethereum L1 as well. But if they want to keep growing, if they want to really compete with Tether, they're going to have to basically make Base the payment chain. I think that's really one of the only ways, or maybe it's actually the only way for them to compete with Tron and compete with USDT on Tron, is basically make a better payments platform, which is what Base can be. And because Base is also much more than just a payments platform, right? It's integrated with things like Firecaster. It's integrated with the entire OP stack because it's built on the OP stack. It's part of the super chain. There are so many network effects that can be gathered here. And if USDC is the default, you know, de facto stablecoin of Base, it's going to get a lot of growth. So I hope that they're doing this. I hope they're doubling down on this. We'll have to see. But I'm very glad that I feel like my thesis has been validated around the fact that I thought it was a mistake that Circle was doing this shotgun approach of putting USDC everywhere. Because one, I mean, Tether already is very large and has a foothold where it matters on chains like Tron, right? For things like payments, and two, it fragments your kind of attention. It fragments what you can focus on, and I believe that with stablecoins, you really need to be laser focused on maybe one or two chains, and kind of getting a foothold there. Then you can maybe expand from there, but. Do you need to expand? Probably not. I feel like Circle did it as a defensive move where they're like, you know, let's have USDC on this chain so people just use USDC instead of Tether or instead of another stablecoin. And it didn't really materialize like that because these other chains basically either failed, they've got no usage, or USDC lost in a really big way to Tether, which is what they did on Tron. So, yeah, but I'll keep you guys updated on what happens here. But I really do hope that they double down on Base now that they've pulled out of Tron. I hope they put all their effort into that because I feel like that's the best use of their time and money. All right, so another layer 2 has joined the EigenLayer ecosystem. So today, that is Fluent. So Fluent, for those of you who don't remember, is a ZK WASM L2 that's being built on Ethereum. And a disclosure here, you guys know I'm an advisor to Fluent, so just getting that out of the way. But you can see here they announced in a tweet thread that Fluentbase has integrated with EigenLayer AVSs, and they've announced a partnership with EigenLayer to integrate this framework with several actively validated services, including EigenDA and Espresso systems. And just a refresher, Fluentbase is a modular framework for building ZK WASM-based computing environments. The framework is customizable and will support 100% WASM and EVM compatibility, modular chains and arbitrary verifiable programs, and different flavors of chains, including rollups and validiums. I'm really glad to see that more and more projects are using EigenDA here, because obviously EigenDA is the flagship product of EigenLayer. It is going to be their biggest kind of product or biggest AVS for quite a while, I believe. Because of the fact that the EigenLayer team has been building it for a while. It's something that they're going to be putting all their effort into, and it's something that obviously already has product market fit, because we already know that these layer 2s that don't necessarily want to pay to store their data on ETH L1, maybe because it's things like a payments network, or maybe it's like NFTs, doesn't really need to be spending all too much on fees, doesn't need to be a full roll-up, doesn't need the full security of Ethereum, right? They can put their data elsewhere, and we're seeing some of them, choose Celestia. But as I've said before, I believe that EigenDA is the better solution because of the fact that DA costs are a race to zero, and with EigenDA, at least you get ETH's economic security, the restaked ETH economic security there, instead of relying on some new token that's part of a chain there. So I'm really glad to see that happening. But I'm also glad to see that we're soon going to be seeing some of these WASM or ZK WASM kind of environments on the L2s, because as you guys know, my most bullish case for L2s isn't necessarily that they're scaling Ethereum, because that's table stakes. I mean, if you're an L2, of course you're scaling Ethereum. But the most bullish thing about them to me is the experimentation that's happening, because this experimentation used to happen on layer 1s. A big reason why a lot of layer 1s got spun up, outside of the griftiness of doing your own kind of like layer 1 token in order to make money, you had no plans to like beat Ethereum to begin with, right? But like a lot of people were frustrated because they couldn't change Ethereum layer 1, right? Or if they wanted to change Ethereum layer 1, it would take a long time because the governance process is slow. So what they would do is they would spin up a new layer 1 and basically be like, okay, well, we're going to like do everything that we think Ethereum should be doing, and we're going to fix like what Ethereum should be fixing, and we're going to do it maybe not using the EVM, maybe using something else. And there are multiple examples of this, right? Cardano doesn't use the EVM, uses the UTXO kind of model. Solana uses the SVM. You have a few other chains out here like Polkadot doing their own thing as well. I think they were doing WASM stuff too, but they had like the whole relay chain model there. There's a few others out there. And the funny thing is though, is that the most successful L1s, most of the most successful L1s that basically had a bit of activity on them, and a lot of them have died off now, but they had a bit of activity on them, were a BSC, that's an EVM network, Tron EVM network, Phantom EVM network, Avalanche's EVM subnet, which is the most used by far, right? EVM network. What else is there? I'm missing other chains here. I'm just going through the list on CoinGecko. There's other ones here that I'm missing right now that were EVM networks, right? And then obviously the L2s as well. The most successful ones are EVM too. But in saying that, I think that just because the EVM is dominant and has been the most successful doesn't mean this experimentation isn't worthwhile, isn't worth doing, and doesn't mean that some of these other networks aren't going to, attract activity in their own right. As I said, Solana is SVM. It's attracted activity in its own right. It's not EVM at all. It's built from the ground up to be something new, and they were able to kind of like get an ecosystem going. They're able to get obviously liquidity and trading volumes and all the good stuff that we see on Ethereum L1 and L2s. And now essentially with the L2s, what we get to do is we get to do that without fragmenting the kind of community. Yes, we fragment liquidity and all that, and I've talked about that before, but we don't fragment the ecosystem. We basically keep it in-house, right? And I talk a lot about this actually with the people that I did the Layer 2 podcast with Bankless. We recorded it the other night. I don't know when it's going live, actually. I forgot to ask when it's going live, but we recorded it the other night. It was great. Honestly, like it was a fantastic discussion. It was one of my favorite podcasts to do. I did it with, just a refresher here, Mike Ippolito and Jordi Alexander, and obviously the Bankless host, David and Ryan. It was a fantastic episode. We dived very kind of deep into these things, and we kind of talked both about the tech and the tokens themselves, right? You guys know my opinions on the tokens, so probably nothing I said on there is going to be news to you, but the tech discussions were really interesting because I think the main takeaway, and not to spoil anything from the podcast, but the main takeaway for all of us from that podcast is that there's so many open questions around L2s right now about like what's going to be the most successful. Are people actually going to use things other than the EVM? Is something like the ZK WASM or the SVM as an L2, is that stuff actually going to take off long term? And really, outside of the open questions around tech, it was also open questions about value accrual too. So we all basically agreed on that there's so much kind of unknowns, but it's so exciting because of that. Like this is basically like Ethereum back in 2015 or even 2014, where there was just so many unknowns about what people were going to do with Ethereum, right? What people are going to do with this new primitive of a world computer. And I think we got the answer to that. Like most of it is DeFi, right? A lot of it is degen stuff. But then we basically came to the conclusion conclusion that Ethereum is a root of trust, right? It's a settlement layer. And now we're building these L2s as experimental environments to basically build anything we can dream of. So that's what I'm most excited about when it comes to L2s. But anyway, I rambled a bit there. You can go check out Fluent's announcement about their partnership with EigenLayer here. Great to see that happening there. All right, so Optimism has announced another airdrop today. This one goes to, I guess, a niche or unique set of users. So they announced airdrop 4, which is allocating over 10 million OP tokens to 22,000 unique addresses. Now, the eligibility criteria for this is different to, I guess, past eligibility criteria. Basically, it's basically going to a lot of the creators on the Optimism and I guess like OP stack, not just OP mainnet, but I believe kind of base as well. And you can kind of go and read the blog post to see what the eligibility criteria is. But it was mostly around creators, kind of NFTs, the social side of things, and basically. Bringing NFT collections on chain and kind of minting them, stuff like that. So yeah, you can go check this out if you're eligible for it, if you didn't know about this airdrop. But that is a huge sum of money, guys. That's like, I think almost 40 million US dollars right now or something like that in terms of kind of the amount of dollar amounts on the OP here. So yeah, that's huge, right? To over 22,000 unique addresses. Unfortunately, I wasn't eligible for this because you guys know I don't really mess around with NFT stuff too much. But if you do, and if you think you're eligible, you can go check this. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, so last thing here was a cast that I put out on Farcast, and I did mention this earlier in the episode that I'd be talking about this with regards to airdrops. So I put out a cast where I said some big airdrops still left to come, and this is obviously in the wake of the Starknet airdrop, where I said I gave a list here of a few projects: EigenLayer, EtherFi, Puffer, Swell, Scroll, ZK Sync, Tycho, and Athena. And then I continued and I said I'm obviously definitely missing some here, but that list alone will have billions of dollars flowing to Ethereum users. Now, I did stick to really the Ethereum-based projects that are airdropping. Obviously, there are other projects in other ecosystems that are going to be airdropping as well. But I feel like this list here is probably going to be worth the most. And look, I'm not just saying that because everything on this list I'm either an advisor to or an investor in. I have to disclose that, obviously, and you guys know if you just listen to the show. But I'm not just saying that because of or because I've got a vested interest in it. I'm saying it based on a number of different factors. Now, I want to outline those factors for you guys so you guys can get an idea of how I came up with this billions of dollars number, right? So let's do a baseline assumption here, and it's going to be more or less for different projects, but let's do a baseline assumption that these projects airdrop 5% of their total token supply, each of them, right? 5% of their total token supply to their users and to whoever else, right? That's the total airdrop. It probably likely is going to be more than that, but I'm keeping it on the conservative side here. So let's look at EigenLayer, for example. So if you want to try and evaluate what EigenLayer should be worth or is going to be worth when it launches, you have to do a relative valuation. Now, okay, what's the closest thing to EigenLayer right now that's publicly traded? I would argue that it's Celestia. Okay, what's Celestia's fully diluted valuation? Last time I checked, it was like $18 billion, right? So you would make the argument, or at least people like to make the argument, that once EigenLayer launches, it's going to be worth 18 billion fully diluted at least. Like that's basically the floor, or I guess like the starting point. Now, that argument seems pretty sound, I think. Obviously it being worth that much is going to be very good for a lot of people, but I think the argument is sound because we see these relative valuations happen all the time, and we see this play out like all the time within the crypto ecosystem. So yeah, you could argue EigenLayer, 18 billion as the floor, but then people will say, well, EigenLayer is much more than just a DA, right? EigenLayer isn't just EigenDA. There's a lot of other things going on, and there's like 6 billion or whatever it is, 8 billion TVL in EigenLayer right now. And EigenLayer has a lot more hype than Celestia does. And EigenLayer is part of the Ethereum ecosystem, which has more money than the other ecosystems do. So you could argue that. And you could say, well, maybe EigenLayer opens more than 18 billion. But I'm not going to put a number on it. I'm not going to tell you what I think here because I'm getting into very speculative territory here. And as I said, I'm an investor in EigenLayer. It is my largest angel investment to date. I think I've said that before. So obviously, if it opens to that kind of evaluation, I'd be a happy camper, but also I have vesting and things like that, obviously. But regardless of that, I don't want to make it about me, of course. If we say just nice clean numbers, EigenLayer is worth 20 billion out of the gate, right? Well, if they airdrop 5%, that's $1 billion airdrop right there, right? That right out of the gate, it's $1 billion airdrop to people right there. If it's a 5% airdrop, if it's a 10% airdrop, that's $2 billion. So, but let's just stick at 5%. It's $1 billion airdrop to obviously EigenLayer people that were getting the points, people that restake with EigenLayer, people maybe solo stakers, maybe other users of Ethereum. I don't know what the criteria is or anything like that. I actually purposely avoid looking at anything like when I'm invested or an advisor to a project. I try not to look at any of the criteria or any of the kind of stuff around the token. I also don't participate myself. I don't do any airdrop farming at all in anything. I believe it's a deep conflict of interest, and I refuse to do that. I would not be able to live with myself if I did that. Obviously, you have to trust me on this, but I don't do any of that stuff. Because I am invested in these things, and I do sometimes have access to privileged knowledge because maybe the team wants my feedback on, what the token's going to look like or what the distribution's going to look like. Of course, I always advocate for things like, 1% non-negotiable protocol guild. Please do it, right? And some of these teams have actually already agreed to do it because of me saying that. But then on top of that as well, there's other things like, who else should you airdrop to? And obviously, I've been advocating for solo stakers and things like that. But I'm just kind of like giving my feedback. They're not going to model it off of what I say, obviously, or they're not going to model all of it off of what I say. But that's how I kind of think about it there. And then we can move down the list here, and we can look at EtherFi, Puffer, and Swell, which are all LST, LRT protocols. Closest comp for that is, I think, Lido as the most valuable one. So if you look at Lido, you can say Lido's fully diluted valuation right now is $3 billion. And then you can look at Rocket Pool is the next closest comp, I think. If you go and look at RPL, that's worth around $600 billion fully diluted valuation. And then you can do like a naive TVL thing where EtherFi has, I think, $1.5 billion TVL. Puffer, about billion, Swell, 800 million or something, I think. So, I mean, they're pretty close to each other relative here. But then you look at Lido's TVL and it's like 20 billion or something. So doing a naive kind of TVL to fully diluted valuation is probably not going to give you much signal there. So let's just take a nice middle ground and let's just say each of these things, just for sake of argument, EtherFi, Puffer, and Swell, they all open at like, I don't know, $1 billion fully diluted valuation, right? So then you have 5% of each of those would be 150 million all up, right? $150 million all up. So, I mean, we're already obviously with EigenLayer at $1 billion, but now we're at 150 million for these three. I don't know if they're going to open more or less than that, but those are pretty sizable airdrops. So maybe they airdrop 10% instead of 5% as well, right? So that could be even more there. But those are still pretty sizable airdrops. Next, you have the layer 2s, right? Scroll, ZK Sync, and Tycho. These are even harder to evaluate because people, again, do the TVL kind of thing here. But if we just look at Starknet, for example, which launched, I believe, at $30 billion TVL, it's down to about $20 billion right now. And then you look at Starknet's TVL, well, it's very low. Like, I'm actually just looking this up on my other screen right now because I don't know off the top of my head. But Starknet's TVL is 200 million. And it was worth 20 billion. It's worth 20 billion TVL, which is about the same as Arbitrum, which has $12.5 billion TVL in it, right? And the more than OP, which has $7 billion TVL. So you can't do a TVL analysis here. This is obviously not how the market is treating these things. Okay, then, what can we do? Well, we can do a comp. What are most of the L2s worth right now? Are they worth over $10 billion fully diluted valuation? All of them? Well, not all of them, but most of them? Yes. Okay, let's say that Scroll, ZK Sync, and Tycho all launch at a $10 billion valuation each. Well, 5% each of that is 500 million, or added up is 1.5 billion. So EigenLayer and the L2s at 2.5 billion. With the LST protocols, you have a 2.75 billion. And then the last one here is Athena. This is a relatively new project. There's not really a comp that you can do here, but given the hype, given the fact that it's talked about a lot in, I guess, like a negative way, which actually, funny enough, does add valuation to it because we're in an attention, does add more valuation to it because we're in an attention economy. I don't even know what valuation to give Athena here of what it would open at. Let's just say, to be safe, it opens at like, I don't know, $2 billion fully. I mean, I don't even know. Like, I honestly can't value it right now. But let's just say $2 billion fully diluted. They airdrop 50%. That's 100 million there, right? Sorry, they airdrop 5%. That's 100 million there. So, yeah, you're almost at $3 billion here, guys, from just these projects. And as I said, there are more projects than this. There's other massive kind of, I guess not yet L2s, but in the future L2s like Blast, right, that are going to be doing an airdrop. There's wallets that are probably going to be doing airdrops like Rainbow. right? And Rabby, like, and maybe MetaMask. I don't know. That's a wild card as well, right? Infura as well still hasn't done their token. They signaled that they were going to do that a while ago. So there are still all these other airdrops that I haven't even listed here. So that's where I got the billions of dollars flowing to Ethereum users number from. I would say that I'm extremely confident in EigenLayer launching at basically the same valuation that Celestia is whenever EigenLayer launches. Like, I'd be very, very surprised if it didn't launch at that valuation, given the fact that it is basically the same product as Celestia and more, right? EigenLayer is a similar product, but much more than that, right? But then the other ones, as I said, like, it's much harder to kind of comp these things. It's much harder to value these things. The L2s are easier than the LRT protocols, and all of them are easier than Athena, but that's my general view on things. And this is probably one of the only times I'm going to talk about this sorts of stuff. You guys know that I don't like to speculate too much, because you're going to take what I just said, and you're not going to take it as investment advice, but you're going to take what I just said and you're going to be like, okay, that either makes a lot of sense or it doesn't, and then you're going to either consciously or subconsciously make investment decisions based on that, or not just investment decisions, but like airdrop farming decisions based on that. And I don't want you to do that. I know that me saying I don't want you to do that is not going to prevent you from doing it, because you're just going to do whatever you want, and that's fine. Like, obviously you can do whatever you want, but I just want to caution against doing anything based on what I'm saying. I ran through my logic of how I'm doing the valuations of these things and how I think about it in my head. You know that I'm either an investor and advisor in literally all of these projects, which means that I stand to benefit from all of them, obviously, right? And also, I think that, I'm more bullish than most people on the Ethereum ecosystem. So I have a bullish bias too. So with those disclaimers in mind there, that's how I think about these things. But as I said, that is a rare look into how I think about things. I probably will talk about more of this stuff with Eric, to be honest. But on the Refuel, I like to avoid talking about it too much for the reasons I just outlined there. But anyway, I've gone over time again. I mean, as I said at the start of the episode, the Refuels are getting more and more listeners and watchers, and the Refuels are now apparently getting longer as well, which I guess you guys are probably not too sad about, because there have been rug fuels before, and you know what, there actually might be a rug fuel tomorrow. I'm just thinking now, it just depends on a couple of things, but I'll try my best for there not to be, but we'll see. And unfortunately, I haven't recorded the podcast with Eric yet, so I wouldn't be able to put that live if there was a rug fuel tomorrow, but just fair warning, there might be. But anyway, you've probably been spoiled over the last few days with the content, with the extra long episodes. But anyway, I'm rambling, ranting, enough from me today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all hopefully tomorrow. Thanks everyone.